It's time for connection of the mind, body, and emotions. Welcome to a place where you can unplug, tune in, and create. It's time for Conjuring the Human Spirit with your hosts, Allison Parplasha and Shawn McGuire Meeks. You're invited. Let's begin.
Well, hey everyone. Welcome to the first episode of Conjuring the Human Spirit. My name is Shawn McGuire Meeks, and I'm your host, along with my other illustrious friend, Allison Parplasha.
Hello. Welcome, everyone.
We are so glad you've decided to join us today for what is started off as a phone conversation between the two of us, and we kept saying, we ought to do a podcast about this. And so here we are, and we're glad you've joined us today. So we thought we'd just start off by talking a little bit about ourselves and who we are and how we got here in front of these microphones to be with you today about talking about the human spirit. Most interesting, Allison and I, we're sitting here in Georgia at the farm, at a 41-acre farm that most recently bought a couple of years ago. And while I was buying the farm, Allison moved to Savannah, but we're both from this town called Erie, Pennsylvania. And we both grew up there, and it was just like auspicious that she moved just a couple hours down the road from where I was called to buy this farm. And so it's pretty exciting that we're sitting across one another talking about the human spirit in person.
Exactly. Here we are.
And both from the same place. So I am from Erie, Pennsylvania, was raised in a very poor household as a little boy, very sensitive little boy. We'll just kind of get right to the human spirit, right to the human spirit of the gentleness that was this little boy. The product of two black sheep parents, both ostracized from their own family in various ways. And so it was an interesting upbringing. This sensitive boy grew up in this very challenging environment. And even from when I was a little boy, the spirit of me was always searching for something, some deep meaning. And I think even as a little boy, that people could see that in me. It didn't matter whether I was in the amusement park line or at the grocery store, whether I was 5 years old or 10 years old. These grown-ups were telling me these intimate stories about themselves, about the spirit of them. And so as I was a young boy, I often wondered, why are people telling me all these things? And so, so I've always been real interested in that inquiry. Why were people talking to me about it? And how can I show up to be there for their stories? Did anything like that ever happen for you, Allison?
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting because we were both, obviously raised in Erie, but we were raised kind of like on different sides. So I'm the youngest of six. We're all less than a year apart. I was raised privileged, and my mom actually gave a talk in the 80s, and
is that the one I just listened to?
Yes,
oh,
and sadly, my mom did pass away this past January, and so we've all been going through the letters and the archives, and we discovered this talk that she gave to Rotary. And I came from a background. How would you describe it, Shawn? You eloquently said.
I don't remember what I said. It was an interesting talk. I listened to her mother's 30-minute Rotary talk and got a whole insight into this charmed, or what your mother was saying was such a charmed growing up.
Sure. And yet there was also kind of this tendency to be focusing on all the beauty, which is wonderful. But there were also a lot of things kind of in between the spaces that were challenging and difficult. And I think, yes, like as a child, I just remember, so we did live in Erie, but I lived in Syracuse, New York for a little while. And I just remember like 4 or 5 years old, being out in the woods and really just loving to be alone and being with spirit. That was just really kind of my time to commune with nature. And that like always continued, even when like our move to Erie, looking back, because Shawn and I are a few years apart. And, I think
she's
like
much older than I am.
That's right. And like in the 70s and 80s, like where were the parents, right? They're just like, a bit MIA. And I just had this tremendous freedom. So I remember, by myself, 10 years old, 11 years old, going down to the creek and playing in the water, playing in the woods alone often. I mean, I was often with siblings, but often alone. And that was just my time where I really felt this incredible sensation of being one with spirit through the woods and through the trees, and was blessed to have that really throughout. I just moved to Savannah a year and a half ago, so we lived out in the woods for 20 years and just communing with the trees.
You had that knowing when you were that young? You were communing with spirit?
I mean, I wouldn't articulate, if somebody asked me, but
What did it feel like?
It felt like I wasn't alone. Like I never really, I really felt safe. And that continued, really throughout adulthood. And I do miss the woods, living in Erie where we did live, because, sometimes I'm like, I don't know if I have all these kind of physical connections with people. I would kind of go in and out of it. But I always felt kind of this connection, but like energies, entities, whatever you want to call them, that were always surrounding me. And it was an incredible sensation around my heart, very peaceful, very easeful. And yeah, absolutely.
I had no peace growing up. Really, no. I really didn't. I mean, I had my great Aunt Martha and my grandmother, they saw the drama and trauma that we were in as children, and they were there for the rescue. And without them, I wouldn't have shoes on my feet or school clothes. But I left the house out of pure survival. Just getting out of what was so horrible, and getting on my bicycle, which was freedom, and, you said Syracuse, New York. I could ride my bike to the state line, the Ohio state line, because it was a tri-state area,
Yes.
Erie is.
Yeah.
And so you could go to New York, you could go to Ohio. But I wanted to go as far as I could go away from what was happening at the house. And so I did. And to your point, like back then when you're kids, like you could just get on your bike and go. I mean, no one asked where I was or whether the creeper was out in the street or anything like that.
Exactly.
It was just be back at 5:30 for dinner. That was the primary thing.
Yeah, we had a bell. So my mom would just stand outside.
Of course you did.
I know, right?
Y'all should hear this this audio of her mother. Goodness gracious.
It was a sterling silver bell.
Well, I bet it was polished to the T, honey.
But that's what brought us in.
Yeah.
At night. So there's the pros and cons, because if we look at just the current generation and the helicopter parents, some people call them the lawnmower parents, where they're just on top of their kids 24/7. There was a lot of beauty in that freedom that I really appreciate to this day. So tell me a little bit more about just what led you, Shawn, to be kind of sitting where you are right now.
Oh, goodness. Well, as I said, it started as a little boy, and then all the drama and trauma that was my life. I mean, if you go to my website, McGuireLife.com, the name of my business is McGuire Life, because my life has been the journey of wounds and the healing from those wounds. And so the lessons that I have gathered in attempt to heal myself are the same tools that I use with my clients. And so it started from way back, when I was this wounded little boy, and then being different and didn't quite know how from other little boys. There was a kid on the corner who was a 6-year-old who was being molested by his brother, and it was a 9-year-old, a stepbrother, and he was the bully on the block, my friend, the 6-year-old. And so he began to molest me, another 6-year-old.
Oh my gosh.
And so anything his brother did with him, he did with me. And so I was just such a gentle soul, and I was afraid to get beat up. He was always threatened to beat me up unless I did what he wanted me to do. And so, as I grew up in that was years happening, I kept him close because I didn't want him to beat me up, and yet I had to endure what his brother was doing to him, to me. And so I say that because I'm a gay man, and so for so long I didn't know why I was gay, right? Even, up until my early 20s or mid 20s, still asking the question why, because this happened to me so young.
Yeah.
That was it the nature or nurture? Is it because of what would happen to me, or am I just a gay guy because I'm a gay guy? I was born this way. I could never answer that fundamental question. And so, and my mother, she she married a prophet. So she divorced my biological father and then married a guy who called himself a prophet. And she was affirmed, she affirmed him in that. There was like a cult in my house. And, we were sinners, and the Bible sat next to him my whole growing up, and here I am, the gay boy, and who was going to hell. And I didn't want to go to hell. And so as I grew up, I wore all these various masks. We're talking about the human spirit. So the genuine spirit of me was always masked. I was so popular in school, but I wore whatever mask. If I was with the black folks, I wore that mask. The gay folks, I wore that. The stoners, I wore that mask. Whatever people wanted me to be, I was able to do that. And anything but be who I actually was, which is I was attracted to the boy. And I couldn't say that. I couldn't even say it to myself.
Yeah.
I didn't want to go to hell, right? Yeah, so that really led me to go to church and try to pray this gay away so that I didn't have to admit to my mother or anyone for that matter that I was gay, and got caught up in all the Exodus and that movement. I don't know if you know anything about it. You ever heard of Exodus?
I've heard of it, but I really don't know.
Yeah, well, it's just
about
to pray the gay away in a militant way for children. And it's just.
Was this coming from your family, or?
Yeah, my mother sent me there.
So did she just kind of have an intuition? That
I had a relationship when I was 13 with a 27-year-old.
Oh, wow.
In the theater. That came out, and she found out about it, and she was concerned, and so she wanted me to not be gay, and so
rather than the fact that you're being sexually abused.
Yeah, it was really interesting.
Yeah.
There was no repercussions for this man. It was just I was the one. So I had all these layers upon this gentle human spirit that I was, as a little boy. And when I listened to your mother, there was really, it didn't seem like, you can answer this, just listening to that 30 minutes of your mother speaking at the Rotary, but it didn't really seem like there was a whole lot of opportunity for you to step outside of that narrow lane she created for you.
Yeah, and I often thought, like, how do you raise 6 kids all less than a year apart? And it was a traditional family unit. And so my father was working, and, I come from the perspective everyone's doing the best they can with the tools they had. He certainly didn't have, like, a lot of relationship tools. So in a lot of ways, energetically, I'd say emotionally, he was MIA. So it was kind of up to her. So it's like, I think she just raised us as a tribe. I always thought, like, my mom would be like an amazing, like, CEO, of a company. She just,
based on
right? I know, she just kind of knew, and she was never like mean or unkind, or anything like that. But it was just, we were raised as a tribe, and so it wasn't like, Allison, what do you want for dinner? It was like, this is what we're having for dinner, which is smart, I think, in a lot of ways. But
I think parents have gone overboard.
I know, right?
Do you want peanut butter and jelly, or do you want?
I know, that's me, unfortunately. But anyway, so it's like I didn't really have a sense of who I was, because I was just kind of told, well, this is who you are. And but I always felt kind of like the odd man out. And, I'm eccentric.
And you were 7 years younger than
the oldest, yeah.
Than the next sibling.
Yeah. No. My brother is just 11 months older than me. Yeah.
Me.
So the oldest is 7 years older.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. So no, we're all a year apart. So I'd say, I did not have a strong sense of self at all. Not a strong sense of I, because of that the way we were raised.
Yeah. Did that Julia Sugarbaker thing resonate with you at all around?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the listeners, if you haven't heard the nights that the lights went out in Georgia, is Julia Sugarbaker on Designing Women giving this speech about her sister. And it's very reminiscent of this 30-minute speech that her mother gave at the Rotary Club. I mean, it's just very certain and matter of fact, prim, proper, and exacting.
Yes.
Yeah. I was bumping my way trying to figure it out myself. I was always been looking for signs, like the human spirit is offering me signs. I remember when I didn't want to admit I was gay, I would like be racing toward a stoplight, and I'm like, if it's red by the time I get there, I'm not gay, and if it's green, then I'm gay, and somewhere in between. And not that I ever abided by what happened. I just knew I was, and I just wanted affirmation in some kind of way to be seen in some kind of way, When I went to college at Edinburgh University, just outside of Erie, I was so popular in high school. I was student body president. I was voted most talented and all of that. And then I went to the big fish. We didn't have a car growing up. We were so poor. So 15 minutes out of town was a long way by car, for me. So I felt like I was a world away. And when I got there and got into the dorms, my roommate wasn't there. And the next day, when the roommate finally showed up, he was a 40-year-old black minister. And
It's wild.
I just knew it was a sign. Like, it was a sign that I needed to leave this secular college and I needed to go to Bible college and pray the gay away finally and forever. That was my first and last semester at Edinburgh, and off I went to Southeastern Bible College of the Assemblies of God in Lakeland, Florida, where I've always been an open book, the spirit of me. Just, my mother used to say, don't tell everything you know, because then you don't know anything. You've told everything. And I still do. It's particularly honest. I'm trying to be honest in all my affairs. And I kind of always have been that way. And so when I went to Bible college, I told them, I'm here because I'm gay and I want to pray it away. And I spent the first semester with hands being laid on me and casting demons out.
Oh, gosh.
And and everywhere I went, casting demons, casting the demon of homosexuality out of me and all of that. And it didn't work.
Gratefully so.
Yeah. But that led to homelessness because I couldn't go back the second year. I couldn't go back to the college like that. I couldn't tell my mother I was gay, and so I was kind of caught in a pickle. I really wasn't sure what to do. And so I pretended like I was going back to school, but never signed up. So I got on a plane and went back to Florida, and I was naive to think I could stay in the dorm. And
Well, you were so young,
I look back now, I felt
You
so
were a
old
baby.
then.
I know, but you were
yeah.
a baby and no mentors.
No, because I couldn't talk about the truth of who I was. You can't be mentored if you're not willing to talk about the truth. The secrets, we're as sick as our secrets. Soul sick, spirit sick, And so I tried to live in the dorms, and they found out about me real quick, and I ended up being homeless. And I was living in this girl's car for 3 months until I was able to get a job and scrape together enough money to get an apartment that had rats and fleas and all of that.
What helped you survive during that time?
Well, I started covering pool tables and delivering jukeboxes, and I delivered one to this Chinese restaurant, and there was a guy there, and he invited me back to the opening of the lounge. It was just a Chinese restaurant with a lounge, and I delivered this jukebox that had hella bass. I mean, it was really awesome. And he invited me there for the opening, and he gave me all these drink tickets. And I was only 19 or 20. And I was like, he thinks I'm 21. And invited me back there. And so the girl who I was living in her car, I asked her to go with me. And she came with me. And when we were there for the evening and the bar was closing, he rubbed his foot up my leg and said, "Stay, we're having an after party." So I had to tell Stacia that I was gay. And I did that night. And this guy came on to me, and I fell in love, and it was the first adult love and all of that.
All
and
in the Chinese restaurant lounge.
all happened in a Chinese restaurant lounge. Yeah. And my coming out song, I say, was Vogue, Madonna, because that was playing on that jukebox on that. There was a dance floor in the Chinese restaurant lounge. God. Yeah. And his name was Michael. And but this girl, she called my mother, Allison, and told my mother I was gay. And when I went home,
was she part of the Bible college? How did?
Yeah, she was at the Bible college. Yeah, because he pulled me into the Chinese restaurant, in the dark part of the Chinese restaurant, and started to have his way with me. And she screams in there. She says, "You gotta be with me before you're with him." So I think she was in love with me, but I don't know. But or she wanted me one way or another. Anyway, she called my mother because she was upset that I wasn't with her. I was with him. I went home there a couple of weeks later, Allison, at Perkins on Peach Street, and she told me, Stacia called me and told me that you're gay, and I can never talk to you again. So long as you're choosing this lifestyle, I can never talk to you again. And I said, that's okay, because I'm in love with Michael, and I'm in love, and I'm just feeling all the feels that was this guy.
And you were 19, right?
I was 19.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I flew back and went back to the Chinese restaurant lounge and went to the bar and says, where's Michael? And the guy said, he's in Tampa, Shawn, with his new boyfriend. He doesn't have time to train you. Yeah. So you asked me, how did I survive? I'm not sure, because I went back to that flea-ridden, rat-infested apartment, drank a bottle of Grand Marnier, and slit my wrists.
Oh, wow.
So.
Yeah. And how did you survive that?
Well, there was a woman, it's again about listening to the human spirit, I've always been listening. When I was in Stacey's car one night and I was out driving, trying to find a place to park to sleep for the night, I was driving down this main road and there was a young man my age walking, and something in me screamed, pick him up. And what is that? Pick him up. What is that? Turn around, pick him up. So I turned around, picked him up, took him home, and it was his mother, Becky, who was there to meet me, and she found out I was homeless, and she let me sleep on her couch. And she was a Christian, and so once I moved out off of her couch into that apartment, and when I passed out from bleeding, and I locked the back door with the chain. Remember those chains I had on the door? And she said an angel came to her and told her to come to my apartment immediately. And so she cracked the door, saw me on the floor, kicked the door down, called EMS. And the next thing I know, I'm waking up in the ambulance, and the guys, because I had a picture of Jesus above my bed, and and the guy's like, what happened? Jesus was above the bed the whole time. Like, why didn't you just call on Jesus? And the thing is, Jesus was the problem. Or at least the concept of Jesus that I had.
Yeah. And it's interesting because you still had it on your wall.
Still had, longing to grab hold of something to ease this pain and suffering. Yeah, but over time, they didn't want me. They didn't want the gay guy. No one wanted the gay guy back then. We've assimilated now, but for this being a spiritual guy, a young man looking for a mentor, groundedness, knocking on every door, no room in the inn, no room in the inn, no room in the inn. You know? This isn't poor me. It's just the reality of what it was back then.
Yeah. And yet these spiritual mentors came out of the woodwork, literally.
In what regard?
Just that woman, showed up and was like, you can
angels.
stay here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So these kind of angels in disguise.
Yeah. Yeah. That was pretty dramatic. But again, how did I survive? One of the things is meeting my husband 30 years ago is, because no one's ever showed me unconditional love, ever. No one. Aunt Martha did. Let me just say that. But put shoes on my feet. But, I hadn't met anyone. And I met Jeff, and my life completely changed when I met him. And I thought, I've got to step it up. I've got a good one. And I can't be this mess that I am. And so you talk about a mentor. I think that was probably the first mentor. I didn't even know how to pay my bills, And, he came and said, let's look at your bills. I go, they're so big, I can't even pay them. I don't know. And he's like, let's look at them. I'm afraid, because I didn't even open my bills. I was so afraid. And I said, my student loan bill, it's the biggest one ever, And he's like, let's put it all on the table. Let's look at it. And I'm like, here it is. And he whipped out his checkbook and wrote a check and paid off my student loans.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Do you know, Allison, I was paying $10 a month on my student loans.
Well, I can see why,
Do you know how much my student loans were?
How much?
$2,100.
Yeah.
It might as well have been $210,000.
Yeah.
To me, I always had a limited view of life coming from Erie, and maybe it's just because I was so poor. Did you have big dreams and coming from Erie?
My parents, because they're not from Erie, my mother was from Boston, my dad was from Syracuse. We were raised that there is a much bigger world out there. So, we were encouraged to leave early on. When I was 17, I went on Outward Bound, which was like a leadership program for young people where I lived out in the woods for 21 days. Again, I was very blessed with the opportunities I did have. So I went to school in Michigan. We were not allowed to go to school in Erie. And then I lived in Europe for a year. I lived in Arizona for a year. I lived in Chicago for a year. And that was encouraged. And so that each time like I got out, my dreams became bigger and bigger and bigger.
Were they dreams of yours or were they dreams of your
They
mother?
started to become dreams of mine, but I needed to leave for me to develop my own dreams. But even like my bachelor's degrees in psychology, but that was like all 6 of us have our degrees in psychology. And my mom was getting, like she has her master's in counseling. So I think, I was just kind of following in the footsteps of everybody else. But like as time progressed, then I started getting more of a sense of I. Like, who am I? When I lived in Europe by myself, I lived in Paris by myself for 6 months. It was like I just remember going to like museums and I'm like, there was like nobody over like my shoulder saying their opinion of the painting or this is what I think or this is my experience. And I came face to face with, well, what are my opinions? What do I like? What do I dislike? It was a profound time of loneliness and probably deep depression looking back. But it was also like this rebirthing of myself of like, well, who am I not in relationship to my family, which is an important developmental milestone. So yeah, that did start to happen. So as far as dreams, yes, they were encouraged, but they didn't really begin until I left the tribe.
Part 2 of Introductions with Allison and Shawn continue on the next episode. Thanks for listening to Conjuring the Human Spirit. You can connect with us and even make plans to work one-on-one with Shawn at McGuireLife.com and with Allison at viespritcoaching.com. That's VIEESPRIT coaching.com, or tap the links provided in the description of this episode. Until next time, remember, you're not alone.